This interview is regarding artificial intelligence and how it impacts the hiring process, as well as trends that are coming up in 2018 and possibly throughout 2019. So our first question is, as human resource managers and professionals become increasingly more responsible for the overall functioning of the individuals within a company, what do you think are the top 3 skills HR managers need to have in this world of artificial intelligence?
So I think there's going to be 2 types of skill sets that are going to become more valuable, and that's sort of divided into people focused on data skills or data focused skills. Mm-hmm. So, for example, HR managers are going to shift more into a talent advisory role.
Right.
So right now, if their role is more administrative, or they're doing things as AI essentially will start automating sort of maybe more administrative tasks, mm-hmm. That will free up some opportunity and time for HR to sort of become the ideal of, probably why they approach the profession in the first place, which is to do more of a talent advisory role. And what that means is using their creativity to solve problems with recruiting and HR, mm-hmm. Figuring out more or becoming more knowledgeable about the business. So understanding how HR issues and recruiting issues can actually affect business outcomes.
Right.
And then figuring out how to more gain influence and buy-in with hiring managers as well as candidates. So it's this idea that they'll have more time to be more strategic. Mm-hmm. So that's the idea that, analyzing the ROI of their practices, of the tools that they use, of the, analyzing the outcomes of any AI technology that they're using in their recruiting or HR processes. Mm-hmm. And then, having more strategic initiatives in terms of their HR process or their recruiting process. Right now, a lot of recruiting is reactive backfilling. So, the dream is sort of to be able to be proactive in terms of what do we predict is our future growth and revenue, and let's hire for that proactively versus mm-hmm. sort of this last minute or recruiting, as on demand almost. So right. It's, the idea that they can just be more strategic that way. In terms of the data focused skills, I think one of the biggest skills that we're going to need in general, but HR as well, is the idea to be, as AI and technology start dominating the workplace more and more, there's going to be massive amounts of data being analyzed as well as massive amounts of data results and outcomes. Mm-hmm. So the idea is that, that type of those types of reports of metrics and outcomes are meaningless unless you have someone who understands, what insights can we actually gain from that. So, what are the actual analytics that we can act on?
Right.
So, using those data outcomes to then, come up with a solution, come up with a theory and a solution, a recommended solution, and then be able to implement that and then show the results of that, implementation, whether it was successful or not successful.
Okay, good. That leads to the next question of, we know today that just having a higher level of education and a positive attitude are nowhere near enough for employees to make it in the current job climate. So what are some modern work tools you think are needed, and how can employers go through that process of reskilling in the workplace?
That's, I think there's going to be 2 sort of movements happening kind of simultaneously. And one will be that employers will become or be forced to become more open-minded in terms of what they consider qualified employees or qualified candidates. So right. The idea that, maybe people from more non-conventional backgrounds. So, not necessarily people who have like a bachelor's degree, mm-hmm. Or, years of experience in the exact same industry. Mm-hmm. So the idea that, there are people who can do the job just as successfully, but they don't necessarily have that, sort of what you think the ideal profile is. So I think that the sort of the modern tools that are happening now is people using these massive online courses. Mm-hmm. So I think right now it's like higher education is your own personal success. But one thing is like right now we have this concept of like micro degrees. So it's this idea that you want to specialize and reskill yourself or learn a new skill. So instead of taking like, traditionally a 1 or 2 years, master's or even a certification, there's these micro degrees that you can take these online courses and then reskill yourself, without that huge time commitment.
Right.
I think the other thing would be maybe not necessarily more like a work tool, but I think it's more employees and candidates are both starting to sort of embrace the concept of personal branding. So it's not, like you said, it's not enough to say like, oh, I have a degree or, I'm a, great team worker. It's more like, what do you have out there? Like, what have you been doing to differentiate yourself? Like, do you have some presentations that, maybe you have videos of? Have you given, have you written anything? Maybe have you tried to further your thought leadership in your field? So this concept of, personal branding, which is more just like evidence of your abilities and competence and personality, but in a way that's findable. So, whether that's a blog post or a video or a presentation. So something out there that people can say, yeah, this person is actually, highly qualified and able to do the role.
Right. Something that makes them more unique than the average candidate.
Yeah. Or I think even just to, some type of way to showcase what is already on paper. So, if you do have this, degree, but like there's some concrete or tangible ways to showcase your skills in, profession X. So that would be, and I think actually more and more people also have online portfolios, especially if you're in technology. They have like GitHub, profiles.
Okay, very interesting. So with the massive amount of data that's being used to offer suggestions on the best candidates, when we post a job on LinkedIn, the algorithms in LinkedIn will say, oh, this is the best match for your job position without the person even applying. So what are some of the ways artificial intelligence can and cannot replace human recruiters? And then I guess how can AI be integrated into the other aspects of the hiring process, such as employee training after 6 months, 3 months, a year, and even onboarding and offboarding?
Yeah. So I think what we're finding is that human recruiters cannot be replaced in terms of winning the candidates over to the role. So the idea that persuading the candidate that they are the right fit for the role. So I think that is still a human to human connection that both candidates and recruiters want. So the other thing is that candidates in general also very much value the human touch first and foremost. I think what they are is that they're realistic, that is not possible at every touch point. So they still value and appreciate, technology automated response. Even letting a candidate know you received their application through an automated email is, right now, that's not even, that's like most companies don't even do that. So the idea that there's a lot of low hanging fruit right now that automation can solve. It's the idea that what AI is replacing is almost like also what things human recruiters are not doing currently, which is, they cannot answer every single candidate's every question. Right. So that's why people are starting to, adopt chatbots for that purpose. So it's not even necessarily replacing them. It's the idea that they're doing the work that they do not have the bandwidth for right now. Right. And I think AI is definitely actually being integrated in other parts of the hiring process. It actually has very clear implications for things like training and onboarding. So one way, again, is through a chatbot. So the idea is that it's sort of like on demand in real time questions. So, an employee has a question about anything, about the job or about the company, they can ask a chatbot. They can have personalized training to, like going through some qualifications, like, what are your actual needs? Like, what are the things you want to know? And here are like the personalized materials for that. So I think that actually has a lot of interesting applications for AI. And I actually think that is what's happening now. So usually that's more integrated in either an ATS or an HRM. So that's definitely gaining gaining interest. And I think what's happening is AI is moving farther downstream. So.
Downstream as well. Awesome. So that leads to another question of, we know that hiring looks drastically different than it did even just 10 years ago. So how do you think companies can do a better job of focusing on gathering and analyzing the right data before making a decision?
I would say historically the resume hasn't been like a great source of information sometimes. But I would say using AI and machine learning techniques, this sort of the resume data set now becomes much richer. So the idea is that the AI can find patterns that either validate what human, sort of intuition and assumptions are about the actual role qualifications, or it can show you, patterns that you wouldn't have predicted. So there could be patterns in your existing employees and in their resumes that are like strong predictors of success, or what kind of candidates you should be looking for, but the human brain doesn't necessarily can't see those patterns, right? Because we're looking at like millions of resumes or analyzing millions of data points.
Sure.
So, for example, maybe, candidates that have been like, I'm just going to make something up, like, been promoted within a year of them joining a company are like, or employees that have been promoted within a year are, the best performing employees, and you should maybe look for that pattern in candidates. So something like that is something you don't necessarily you cannot really even assess that reading just millions of resumes yourself. You have to sort of use, the technology is better for that. It's built for analyzing, millions of data points and finding patterns. I think, as of now, there are other tools you can use to collect data on candidates, whether that's their social media profiles or their online portfolios, or you could even ask people for assessment. I think currently if there are ways to do that without interrupting the candidate flow, then that is great. I think a lot of companies are reluctant to interrupt their current candidate flow, application flow, because it does create a lot of drop off. So as soon as you ask a candidate to even do an assessment, that creates like so much more drop off. So it's sort of the it depends on what your priorities are and like what you're trying to optimize.
Okay. All right. Well, our next question was, how can companies avoid the type of bias in hiring for certain positions, such as using keywords or filtering for education or filtering for a certain level of experience that could do the company and the potential candidate a disservice if they are actually the candidate that that company needs?
I think by having a strong data set, which is, looking at your past resumes, looking at your existing employees and what their qualifications are, you can sort of avoid a bias in terms of making assumptions that may or may not be accurate. Maybe you think you need 5 years of experience, but if you look at your data, it's like people with 5 years of experience are more likely to quit. So maybe those are not actually the people you want to be hiring. So, I think having, a technology like AI that can read your existing data set or your data points, I think that is a big step into trying to avoid, bias or assumptions maybe that are unfounded. The way, sort of traditionally like AI is being used to address unconscious bias is more thing are candidate demographics, either explicit or implied. So that's their name, their implied race, gender, as well as their age. So it will ignore that in its decision-making process. So, it's so blind hiring that way that, it's basically the AI doesn't care what someone's name is. So it can, sort of analyze and screen resumes sort of more objectively that way.
Okay. All right. So last year in 2017, brand ownership, customer engagement, and people development were just 3 of the main topics that dominated the HR discussion last year. So as we're already well into 2018, what do you think HR professionals need to or should look out for and prepare for the rest of the year and then going into 2019?
So I am, my expertise is more focused on recruiting. So recruitment. So I sort of more familiar with the recruitment trends versus sort of general HR trends.
Okay.
I think this happened since, this was a trend in 2016, 2017, and it's even ramping up even more now in 2018. It's AI and automation. So if you are not at least educating yourself about what is AI, what is AI being used for, what are the applications of AI in recruiting, now is the time. So now the interest is like even ramping up even more. So you definitely, it's now just a part of a conversation. It's going to be, it's not, we're going to be an AI first world, and HR and recruiting are going to follow step. I think the other thing sort of related to that is more a strong focus on candidate experience. So recognizing that candidate experience is now a differentiator. So, we have these really tight talent markets. People they're very competitive. Hiring is increasing this year. So, you cannot increase hiring and have tighter talent pools and not have some kind of resource or tool to help you manage that. So, related to AI and automation, candidate experience is going to be like very top of mind. Right.
Okay. So can you tell us just a little bit about what you do as the data scientist at Ideal?
Yes. So, I was hired, my background is industrial organizational psychology. So I love looking at data and analyzing, sort of both the candidate data side and the employee data side. So again, looking at, right now AI is not a technology. So it always needs to be monitored and audited by human subject matter experts. So someone who will understand, like looking at the outcomes, like, is this, or maybe a potential bias happening with candidate selection. So, and like, why is it happening or where is it happening? Looking at making sure, your models are not picking up on proxy variables, whether that's, like example, a proxy variable would be postal code or zip code. So, oftentimes distance to workplace is correlated with socioeconomic status.
Right.
So making sure you understand, you're not inadvertently using things in the model that should not be predicting, right? Should not be predicting who the best candidates are. And then just keeping aware on top of, again, industry trends, being aware of, advising. So the other thing is, because my expertise is more in diversity and inclusion. So the idea that, like a small advisory role in terms of our like client organizations, they want to make sure that their processes are compliant and like our technology is compliant. So.
All right. Sounds good. Well, we want to thank you today for your time. Thank you for all of the great information that you've passed on to our readers. And we look forward to talking to you in the future.
All right. You're welcome. My pleasure. Bye. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.